Have you ever wondered what hides behind the reflection in your bathroom mirror? What if I told you some stories aren't just made up? What if the legends you heard in school hallways or whispered at sleepovers were real? Tonight, we delve into one of the most terrifying urban myths, one of that has haunted schools, homes, and bathrooms for decades. The Lady of the Mirror, or as she's better known, the Bathroom Blonde. They say if you call her name 3 times, she will appear. But what happens after that is where the real nightmare begins. Imagine standing alone, the flickering light casting shadows on your face, and you whisper her name, Bathroom Blonde. The silence in the room feels heavier, the air colder. You glance into the mirror, heart pounding. You think it's just a silly game, but something feels wrong. Is that a trick of the light? Or did something just move behind you? Turn off the lights, take a deep breath, and get ready to step into a world where the line between legend and reality blurs. Because tonight, once you hear her story, you might just find her lurking in your mirror, waiting. This is the tale of the Bathroom Blonde. Are you brave enough to keep watching? Night had fallen, and the cold wind blew through the poorly closed windows of St. Mary's School. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the distant sound of a dripping faucet echoing through the empty hallways. During the day, the school was full of voices and laughter, but at night, it transformed into something entirely different. Clara, one of the most dedicated students, was there alone, finishing a science project in the laboratory. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, and the faint hum of the equipment around her only intensified the feeling that the building was abandoned, as if she were the last person left in the world. She looked at the clock. It was already past 9 p.m. Her fingers were cold, and her eyes heavy from all the effort, but her determination to finish the work before the next morning pushed her to keep going. When she finally packed up her materials, a strange feeling of discomfort washed over her. Clara wasn't the type to believe in superstitions or urban legends, but that night, something felt different. The environment, once familiar, seemed shrouded in an aura of mystery, as if something were lurking. Walking down the dark hallways toward the exit, Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. She was used to being in the building at night, but for some reason this time it felt as if there were a presence, something invisible yet undeniable. When she reached the door of the girls' bathroom, she hesitated for a moment, but decided to go in quickly to wash her face and shake off the fatigue. The bathroom was illuminated by a single bulb that flickered lightly. Clara walked to the sink and let the cold water run through her fingers before splashing it on her face. As she dried her hands, something in the mirror made her stop. For a second, she thought she saw a shadow pass behind her. Her eyes, still unfocused, stared at the reflection, trying to understand what she had seen. But there was nothing. The bathroom was empty, just as before. Clara laughed at herself, blaming it on exhaustion and her imagination. After all, who hasn't seen things when they're tired? She was about to leave when the memory of an old legend came to her mind. Since elementary school, students had told stories about the asterisk, blonde in the bathroom, asterisk. Everyone knew the legend, but few dared to test it. They said that if you called her 3 times in front of the mirror, she would appear. According to the story, the blonde in the bathroom was a pale woman with long blonde hair who had died tragically and now haunted school bathrooms. Clara had always thought it was nonsense, one of those scary stories kids make up to frighten each other. But at that moment, something nagged at her. Maybe it was the oppressive silence, or the fact that she was alone. But a small inner voice dared her to test the legend. It was a silly idea, and she knew it. But at the same time, she felt an unsettling curiosity. Just for fun, she thought. She approached the mirror again, her reflection seeming more distant under the bathroom's dim light. With her heart racing and a nervous smile, Clara took a deep breath. She felt a little foolish, but the tension in the air pushed her forward. Slowly, she whispered, "Blonde in the bathroom, blonde in the bathroom, blonde in the bathroom." For a brief moment, nothing happened. The silence remained unchanged, and Clara felt ridiculous for having done it. She laughed nervously and was about to leave the bathroom when suddenly she heard the sound of a door creaking in the distance. Her muscles tensed, and her heart nearly leaped out of her chest. The sound seemed far away, but it echoed with disturbing clarity. She instinctively looked behind her, but the hallway was empty, as quiet as before. She tried to calm her breathing, but the fear was beginning to take hold. The feeling that something was wrong intensified with each passing second. She glanced at the mirror again, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed as if her reflection was distorted, as if a shadow were forming over her own image. This time there was no room for jokes. Whatever that feeling was, it didn't seem to be just her imagination. Clara hurried out of the bathroom, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. Every shadow, every dark corner seemed to be hiding something, watching her. When she reached the building's exit, the cool night air enveloped her, but the feeling of unease remained. Even outside, it felt like she was still being watched, as if she had awakened something that shouldn't have been disturbed. When she got home, Clara tried to forget what had happened, convincing herself that it was all just a trick of her mind. But deep down, she knew that night would mark the beginning of something much bigger, something she couldn't explain, but that was already beyond her control. Interruption for a moment to ask for your help. Please like, follow us, and click the bell so you can receive our videos and help the channel grow. The next morning, the sun illuminated the courtyard of St. Mary's School. But for Clara, the environment felt less welcoming than usual. The brightness seemed ironic, contrasting with the weight she felt inside. The sensation of being watched, which had followed her since the previous night, hadn't disappeared. In fact, it seemed to have intensified. Every student, every teacher, all seemed to ignore the invisible tension surrounding Clara. For them, it was just another ordinary day, but for her, something had changed. During the first class, she could hardly concentrate. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the bathroom from the night before, to the distorted reflections, to the sounds that echoed in the empty corridors. It was as if she were reliving every detail, but now, with terrifying clarity. She wondered if there was really something more beyond her imagination. What if she had truly summoned something? Clara looked around the classroom, observing her classmates who unknowingly continued living their peaceful lives. Maybe I should tell someone, she thought, but who would believe her? Her friends would probably laugh and mock her, saying she was overreacting, that it was all just a trick of her mind. But Clara knew something was different, something that made her question everything. During the break, she joined her friends in the courtyard. The usual conversations about tests, parties, and gossip flowed freely. But Clara was distracted, lost in her own thoughts. She couldn't hold back, and at some point, she mentioned the previous night's experience. The words slipped out almost involuntarily. "Do you guys believe in the story of the blonde in the bathroom?" she asked casually, but with evident hesitation. Some friends immediately laughed, as if she had told a joke. "You? Playing around with that? I thought you didn't believe in such nonsense," one of them said, teasing. Clara smiled nervously, but before she could respond, Helena, a classmate who had been quiet until then, looked up and stared at her seriously. The laughter in the group subsided. Helena was known for being skeptical and rarely got involved in these kinds of conversations. But this time, she spoke with a gravity that caught everyone's attention. "That's not a joke, Clara," Helena said, her voice low, almost a whisper. I've been through something similar. The blonde in the bathroom isn't just a kid's story. There's more behind that legend, something we shouldn't provoke. Helena's words hung in the air for a moment. The group fell into a palpable silence, waiting for her to continue. "You called her, didn't you?" Helena asked, looking directly at Clara. Clara hesitated before answering, the discomfort growing in her chest. "Yes, but nothing happened, or almost nothing," she replied, not wanting to sound ridiculous. It was just the sound of a door and, well, maybe a strange reflection, but nothing more. Helena frowned. "It's not that simple. She doesn't show up right away. She makes you feel her presence. She starts to manifest gradually. First, it's shadows, then whispers, until suddenly, she's there, closer than you imagine." Helena's tone was serious, and Clara's eyes widened as fear began to creep in. "And how do you know all this?" one of the friends asked, trying to lighten the conversation with a hint of sarcasm, but Helena's face showed no amusement. "Because it happened to me too. When I was in 7th grade, a friend convinced me to mess with it. I didn't believe in it, of course, but we did it anyway. After that, I started having nightmares. I kept seeing a woman with long blonde hair standing in the corner of my room. I thought it was just dreams, until she started appearing during the day, in mirrors, in windows, even in puddles. I felt like she was watching me, waiting for something." Helena's voice grew even quieter, as if she were revealing a secret. One day, she was really there. No more shadows, reflections, or whispers. I saw her standing in my bathroom mirror, and she smiled at me. The group was now completely silent, all eyes fixed on Helena. Clara began to feel uncomfortable, but she couldn't deny that Helena's story was disturbingly similar to what she had experienced. But the smile. She hadn't seen that. Not yet. Helena then leaned forward slightly, speaking directly to Clara. "If you really called her, if she's already manifested to you in some way, then it's too late. You can't just ignore it. She'll follow you until she gets what she wants." Fear fully took hold of Clara. She tried to push the thought away, telling herself that Helena was exaggerating, that it was all just a coincidence. But deep down, something inside her knew that this was more than just a scary story meant to frighten children. It was real. When the bell rang, Clara quickly stood up, feeling a wave of relief for having an excuse to leave that conversation behind. But as the hours passed, the discomfort lingered. What Helena had said echoed in her mind. She'll follow you until she gets what she wants. That night, when Clara finally got home, the tension that had followed her throughout the day seemed to have intensified. Her house, a place that had always brought her comfort, now felt different. The walls seemed closer, the mirrors more threatening. The simple act of walking into her room now felt disturbing. And then, in the silence of her home, Clara heard the sound. A whisper coming from somewhere nearby. It came from the mirror. She walked slowly toward it, hesitating with every step. As she approached, the glass began to fog, as if someone on the other side was breathing. A name slowly appeared written on the fogged glass. Her own name. Asterisk. Clara Asterisk. Fear paralyzed her for a moment, but survival instinct made her run away from the mirror. Her heart raced, and her labored breathing clouded her thoughts. And in that moment, she knew something was truly wrong. Maybe Helena was right. Maybe the blonde in the bathroom was now after her. The days that followed were torment for Clara. Every time she tried to convince herself that everything was just her imagination, something inexplicable would happen. Small things, but together they began to form a pattern she couldn't ignore. At school, She constantly felt watched. Every time she passed by a mirror, whether in the hallway, the classroom, or even in the bathrooms, she avoided looking directly at it, afraid of what she might see. She couldn't shake the feeling that something else was there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The first clear sign that something was wrong occurred one cold morning while Clara was in the cafeteria, having breakfast with her friends. She tried to act normal, joining in the conversation, laughing at the jokes. But her mind was elsewhere. Suddenly, something caught her attention from across the room. A reflection, almost imperceptible, coming from a window. It was quick, but Clara was certain she saw a blonde figure in the distance, as if sneaking into the background, just out of her line of sight. She blinked, trying to focus again, but the figure had disappeared. She swallowed hard, feeling fear rising within her, but chose not to mention anything. Her friends wouldn't understand, and the last thing she wanted was to seem crazy. Things started to get worse when Clara began hearing whispers. It wasn't something she could ignore or explain. The whispers came from places that didn't make sense. Sometimes from the hallway as she walked alone. Other times while she was in her room at night, trying to sleep. It was as if the sound was at the back of her mind, but at the same time, too close to be a mere daydream. One night, lying in bed, the sound seemed to intensify. She could clearly hear a voice calling her name. It was soft, almost like a whisper in the wind, but undeniably clear. Clara, Clara. A chill ran down her spine, and she quickly sat up in bed, her heart racing. She searched for the source of the sound, but the room was eerily silent. The only noise was the ticking of her wall clock, which seemed louder and more unsettling. Feeling uneasy, she got up and turned on the light, which brought a brief sense of comfort. But when her eyes turned to the mirror in the corner of the room, her stomach dropped. Even from a distance, she knew something wasn't right. The glass of the mirror was fogged, as if someone had just breathed against it. Slowly, she approached, hesitant with each step but unable to stop. When she got close enough, she read what was written in the fog on the mirror. Her name, once again. Clara. She felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. Who could have done that? No one else was home. Clara stepped back, fighting against the rising fear, and in a burst of panic, she covered the mirror with a sheet. It was a temporary solution, but anything that kept her from facing that again was welcome. At school, the situation didn't improve. During classes, Clara felt invisible eyes watching her. If before she had tried to convince herself that everything was a figment of her imagination, now it seemed impossible to ignore the signs. In moments of distraction, while she jotted something down in her notebook, she swore she saw something move out of the corner of her eye. But when she looked up, everything was normal. Yet the feeling of being watched never left her. Haven't you liked the video yet? Aren't following us? And haven't clicked the bell yet? Please take a moment to do it now and help the channel grow so we can make more videos. One day, while walking through the hallways, Clara heard someone calling her name. She quickly turned around, expecting to see a friend, but the hallway was empty. The sound echoed off the walls, as if it were being whispered from multiple places at once. Her heart pounded, and she started walking faster, feeling as though every step was taking her closer to something terrible. Then, a light touch on her shoulder made her freeze. Clara slowly turned around, her fear pounding in her chest. But to her surprise, it was only Helena. The girl was standing there, looking at Clara with a worried expression. "Are you okay?" Helena asked, her voice low and cautious. Clara hesitated for a moment before answering, I don't know." It was the first time she admitted out loud that something was really wrong. Helena sighed, as if she already knew the answer. "You've felt it, haven't you? Her presence, she's watching you. Clara nodded, the dread growing inside her. What's happening, Helena? Why is this happening to me? Helena took a deep breath and pulled her into a quieter corner of the hallway, away from the other students. You did what you shouldn't have done. You summoned the blonde in the bathroom, and now she's with you. She always starts like this, with whispers, shadows, reflections. But the longer it goes on, the stronger she gets. And then, when you least expect it. Helena didn't need to finish the sentence. Clara already knew what would come next. The terror etched on Helena's face said it all. Those words planted themselves deep in Clara's mind, a clear warning that the worst was yet to come. That night, Clara barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the distorted reflection in the mirror, like a threatening shadow, patiently waiting in the back of her mind. And every little sound in her house made her heart jump. The whispers, once vague and indistinct, were now clear, calling her name like a sinister promise of what was to come. In the darkness of her room, Clara curled up under the covers, as if they could protect her. But deep down, she knew there was nowhere to run. The blonde in the bathroom was coming, and no matter how much she tried to avoid it, she was trapped in the cycle of terror she herself had started. In the following days, the sense of proximity became unbearable. Clara avoided mirrors at all costs. She rushed past the bathrooms, averted her eyes from any reflective surface, and even covered the mirrors in her house, in a desperate attempt to escape the presence following her. But what was more disturbing wasn't that the blonde in the bathroom was manifesting. It was the growing certainty that soon she would no longer be just a shadow. She was near, very near, and Clara could feel her invisible presence following her everywhere. Deep down, Clara knew she couldn't run much longer. She would have to face what she had awakened, but how? How do you confront something you can't see? Something that inhabits the darkness, the reflections, and the whispers in the wind. Something that was always lurking, waiting for the right moment to fully reveal itself. The clock was ticking, and Clara knew the moment to face her was drawing near. Clara knew something had to be done. But what? The fear had been growing faster and faster, like a shadow she couldn't push away. The days dragged on slowly, and the presence of the blonde in the bathroom became more palpable, stronger, with every moment. The whispers that were once distant echoes now filled every silent corner of her home and the school. The reflections in the mirrors were no longer vague distortions. They were almost tangible manifestations of the entity she feared. Time was running out, and Clara knew that soon she would have to face her. She sought out Helena again, the only person who seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. She found her late in the afternoon, when the school was nearly empty. Clara was visibly shaken, and her tired eyes reflected sleepless nights. Helena, on the other hand, seemed to already know the reason for the visit. "She's getting closer, isn't she?" asked Helena, as if she had already read Clara's thoughts. Clara nodded, unable to hide the fear in her voice. "I feel her all the time. It's like she's everywhere. The mirrors, the windows, even on surfaces that reflect light. She's surrounding me, Helena. I can't run from this anymore." Helena observed her for a moment, pondering. She seemed to be considering something she had long hesitated to say. There's a way to make her go away, but it's not easy, nor is it safe. And if something goes wrong, you might end up even more trapped with her. Clara stared at Helena, trying to process those words. "What do you mean by that?" Helena sighed and looked around, making sure no one was nearby to hear. She knew Clara was already terrified, but there was no way to soften the truth. "There's a ritual," Helena began, keeping her voice low and controlled. "An old ritual that, according to legend, can banish the blonde in the bathroom back to where she came from. But there are risks. If something goes wrong, the spirit could become even more attached to you, and then there will be no escape." Clara remained silent, trying to absorb the implications of what Helena had just said. On one hand, the idea of getting rid of the blonde in the bathroom was too tempting to ignore. But on the other hand, the fear of failure haunted her. "What happens if I fail?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Helena looked at her seriously. "She will become part of you, not as an external haunting, but as something inside your mind. She'll live through your reflections, always watching, always waiting, until the moment she can take full control." Those words made Clara's stomach churn. The thought of being eternally at the mercy of that entity horrified her. But what could she do? The blonde in the bathroom was growing stronger and stronger, and it seemed only a matter of time before she fully manifested. "I have no choice," Clara said, determined, though fear still gripped her chest. "What do I need to do?" Helena hesitated for a moment before continuing. "We need to go back to the school at night, when it's completely empty. The ritual requires that all the mirrors in the place where the blonde was summoned be broken, one by one. But that's not all. We have to draw protective symbols on every surface where she might appear. If she's truly strong, she'll try to stop us from completing the ritual. That's where it gets dangerous." Clara felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't back down. She couldn't. It was the only solution. "When do we do this?" she asked, her voice firm despite the rising panic. Helena looked at the clock. "Tonight, after midnight." When night finally came, Clara felt her heart pounding like never before. It was as if every fiber of her being was warning her to stop, to run, and never look back. But at the same time, she knew there was nowhere left to run. The blonde in the bathroom would follow her wherever she went. The clock struck midnight, and Clara, accompanied by Helena, returned to the school. The school's entrance, at that hour of the night, seemed very different. The silence was suffocating, and every step the girls took echoed through the empty hallways, amplifying the tension in the air. Clara held a hammer in one hand, while Helena carried a small bag with the necessary items for the ritual. The protective symbols they would draw on the walls and mirrors were ancient, passed down through generations, and according to Helena, they served as a barrier between the living world and the spirit realm. As they moved through the school, the atmosphere grew heavier. The lights flickered more frequently, as if they were about to go out for good. The sound of footsteps, which Clara knew were only hers and Helena's, seemed to echo more intensely, more disturbingly. Every corner, every empty hallway, seemed to hide something lurking. When they finally reached the bathroom where Clara had summoned the blonde, the tension reached its peak. The air was thick, almost hard to breathe. Helena stopped at the door, taking a deep breath before speaking. "From here on, we have to be quick. The longer we take, the stronger she'll become. You break the mirrors, I'll draw the symbols. And above all, don't look at the reflections for too long. She can catch you through them." Clara's heart raced, but she nodded. The two entered, and the bathroom, at that hour, looked very different from when Clara had first been there. The shadows seemed longer, and the mirrors more threatening. Clara raised the hammer, hesitating for a second. But before she could convince herself to stop, Helena began drawing the protective symbols on the walls, her movements quick and precise. There was no more time for doubts. With a firm swing, Clara shattered the first mirror, the sound of the glass breaking, echoing like thunder in the bathroom. As soon as the mirror shattered, the space around them seemed to lightly vibrate, as if something invisible was reacting. As the mirrors were broken, the air grew heavier, and Clara began hearing whispers around her. They were different from before. Now they were sharper, angrier, as if something was fighting to break free. The entire bathroom seemed to vibrate with a sinister energy, and the lights began flickering with alarming intensity. Clara struggled to stay focused. Each broken mirror seemed to enrage the entity even more. The whispers now came from all sides, and at certain moments, Clara swore she saw the pale figure of the blonde in the bathroom reflected in the shattered pieces of glass on the floor. Helena continued drawing the symbols, but her movements became more frantic. Time was running out. When Clara broke the last mirror, a deadly silence fell over the room. But before she could breathe a sigh of relief, she felt something cold behind her. She turned slowly, and there, in the corner of the bathroom, was the blonde in the bathroom, pale, with long blonde hair, empty eyes, and a distorted smile on her lips. She was no longer a shadow or a reflection. She was there, in flesh and bone, standing before them. I can't believe you're not following us yet. Please like the video, follow us, and click the bell. Help us grow the channel. The bathroom seemed to close in around Clara and Helena, as if the space was compressing around them, suffocating. The air was so dense that breathing became a difficult task. The silence that had fallen after the last mirror was oppressive, broken only by the trembling breaths of the two girls. But then, without warning, a chilling sensation filled the room. Clara felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up, and the air became frigid, as if all life had been drained from the place. She knew. Before even turning around, she knew that the blonde in the bathroom was there. No longer a fleeting shadow, no longer a distorted reflection. Now, she was physically present in the world, and the terror that brought to Clara was absolute. Her feet felt glued to the floor. Her mind screamed for her to run, but her body wouldn't respond. Slowly, with a nearly paralyzing fear, Clara turned. There she was. The blonde in the bathroom was exactly as the legends described, pale, almost translucent skin, with empty eyes, deep, like bottomless pits. Her long blonde hair fell over her shoulders in disarray, wet and matted, as if she had just emerged from a submerged grave. But the most terrifying thing was the smile. A thin, stretched, distorted smile that didn't belong to something human. It seemed like a warning, a dark promise that the worst was yet to come. Helena, who stood next to Clara, was also paralyzed with fear. The protective symbols she had drawn on the walls glowed faintly, but not strongly enough to contain the spirit. The blonde in the bathroom took a step forward, and the bathroom floor creaked as if about to collapse. The entity didn't need to say anything. Her presence spoke for itself. She was there to claim what had been promised to her. Clara. For a brief moment, the world seemed to contract, as if time had slowed down. Clara felt her heart pounding in her chest as she struggled to find some way to escape the situation. It was as if her mind was being consumed by fear, unable to think clearly. But something, a spark of courage, made her move. Maybe it was the instinct to survive, or maybe it was the memory of all the nights the blonde in the bathroom had invaded her thoughts, her reflections, her dreams. Helena. What do we do now? Clara asked, her voice trembling but determined. Helena didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the pale figure in front of them, and for a moment, Clara feared her friend was lost to terror. But then, as if waking from a nightmare, Helena spoke quickly. She's still tied to the mirror, even though she's outside of it. We have to make her go back." "How?" Clara asked, trying not to let the desperation show. Helena, still staring at the blonde, replied, "She was summoned through the mirror, and it's through the mirror that she must be sealed again. We have to reverse the summoning, but backward. If we can distract her long enough, we might have a chance to force her back." Clara swallowed hard. Reversing the summoning? It all seemed like a huge risk, but at that moment, it was her only option. She looked around, searching for something, anything that could be used as a weapon or distraction. But the bathroom was nearly empty, except for the shattered pieces of mirror scattered on the floor. Then the blonde in the bathroom took another step forward. Her skeletal hand slowly rose, reaching out toward Clara. It was as if the air around them was being sucked away, and Clara felt that each breath was harder than the last. The entity's smile stretched even further, revealing teeth that looked as sharp as blades. She was close enough for Clara to smell the damp, musty odor emanating from her, like something that had rotted deep within a forgotten place. With her heart racing, Clara decided to act. She ran to one of the larger mirror fragments on the floor and picked it up. The edge was sharp and cut her hand slightly, but she barely felt the pain. Holding the piece of glass firmly, she shouted to Helena, "Now, start the ritual." Helena hesitated for a second, but then began to murmur the words of the summoning, reversing each step, each whisper that had brought the blonde in the bathroom to them. The words seemed to carry their own weight, and the air around them began to vibrate slightly. The blonde, realizing what was happening, let out a deafening scream, a sound that wasn't human. Her hands reached for Clara with terrifying speed, but Clara defended herself with the mirror fragment, raising it like a shield. At the moment, the glass reflected the face of the blonde in the bathroom. Something strange happened. Her reflection in the mirror seemed to tremble, as if being pulled back into the glass. The entity's scream grew louder, now filled with rage and despair. Clara realized it was working, but also knew time was running out. "Helena, keep going!" Clara yelled as she struggled to hold the mirror up in front of the entity. The effort was almost unbearable, as if the fragment of glass was growing heavier and heavier. Helena, now with a firm voice, continued to recite the words of the ritual, reversing the summoning process. Each phrase seemed to tear something away from the blonde in the bathroom, who thrashed about, trying to escape the force pulling her back into the mirror. Then, in a final effort, the blonde reached out toward Clara, her long, sharp nails trying to grasp her. But the moment her fingers touched the mirror fragment, the entity's body began to disintegrate, as if being sucked back into the glass, piece by piece. Her screams echoed through the bathroom, but slowly grew weaker, until finally, everything went silent. The mirror on the floor was broken, but the image of the blonde in the bathroom was sealed inside, motionless, as if trapped in a glass prison. Her distorted smile remained on her face, but now it seemed frozen, like a reminder of something that should never be freed again. Clara collapsed to her knees, exhausted, and let the shard of glass fall from her bleeding hand. Helena approached, breathing heavily but with a look of relief. "We did it," she murmured. Clara looked at the fragment on the floor, where the blonde in the bathroom now rested, still but still smiling. Even trapped, her smile seemed to carry a dark promise, a warning that maybe, at some point, someone would be foolish enough to release her again. They left the school that night, but the weight of what they had faced remained. Clara knew that although they had succeeded, the memory of that smile would never leave her. And deep in her mind, one question persisted. Had she truly been sealed forever? Leave a comment telling us what you liked and what you didn't like, so we can improve our stories. And also, leave a comment with a suggestion for a new story theme. And please like the video, follow us, and click the bell. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.